got to be just asking how you should be positioning yourself during this time of global uncertainty. Let's get perspective, and who better to do that than from Bob Parker, Senior Advisor for Credit Suisse. Bob, it's, you know, where do we go, and how does this issue actually play out now? Because many people are saying there's no way on earth that the EU would ever allow, A, a default, or B, actually them to exit the euro here.
I think that's correct. And let's be clear, there are very clear rules on joining the euro. There is no precedent, no rules for a country to leave the euro. And EU policy, I think, is crystal clear, which is that there has to be a Greek fiscal restructuring. There has to be also very clearly implemented plans in other countries with very high budget deficits, most notably Portugal and Spain. I think there is also an EU focus on what I would describe as the success story in Ireland, because you and I were having this conversation 2 or 3 months ago about Ireland, and if we look at, for
example, it was long ago than that, actually, Bob. Well, I think it was probably a good 6 months ago.
Right, but then the Irish plan came in, and it's achieved credibility in the markets. And if you actually look at Irish CDS spreads relative to Greece, Greece spiraled out to close to 400 basis points. We've come back in a little bit, but very marginally.
Very different, though, aren't they? They
are totally different, yeah, in terms of you know, how they've handled the crisis, what the overall level of debt is. But my point is that the Irish budget deficit, which was under extreme pressure, the Irish banking system was under extreme pressure as well, and the Irish have actually successfully regained market credibility. And I think what the EU would like to do is use that Irish model and just make sure that you have a replication with the Greek situation. Obviously, Greece is much more difficult.
Huge budget cuts have to be implemented. They are in Ireland already. That's the case. The same thing has to happen in Greece. They say they have a proposal on the table, but you know, you do also at the same time, fortunately it's a fairly new government, but you could have serious political ramifications and problems on the streets.
Well, the answer to that is most definitely yes. Now, the politics at the moment actually show that the opinion polls show that the Greek population, the Greek voters, are behind the Greek government. But that's today. Obviously, that could change very quickly indeed, and you could have quite significant political unrest. I think also one needs to highlight, you know, the structural problems in Greece. We've got a very low level of revenue collection relative to GDP. In fact, it's the lowest of any Euroland economy. You know, clearly, the Greek banks are under pressure. One, because they're the biggest buyers of Greek bonds, so therefore there's mark-to-market write-downs there. Also, a number of the Greek banks have bad exposures to Eastern Europe, so there's clear fragility there. I think also one needs to look at the problems within Euroland, and this is not just a Greek problem, of lack of competitiveness of a number of economies, the weaker economies, relative to Germany. And if you look at, for example, unit labour costs over the last 10 years, Germany's been flat. Countries like Spain, unit labour costs are up close to 30%.
Why is that the case here? Is it simply because they've all played catch-up with the euro that they've gone into, which is overvalued?
Well, I think a number of problems. The first problem, obviously, has been what low interest rates have done to the weaker economies. And you had the real estate bubble in Ireland, in Spain. You've had the major fallout from the bursting of those bubbles. I think a more fundamental problem, though, is actually the competitiveness of service sector and manufacturing in the weaker economies like Greece. And the sad reality is they're just not competitive.
Very quickly, you know, how do these problems go to Spain very quickly here, you know, in terms of their budget deficit, and how will it play out? You can't have
I think the first point is that the debt problem in Spain is minor relative to Greece. Now, debt in 2011 is going to be 74% of GDP. What Spain needs, like the other economies under stress, is a very clear, credible implementation of the budget cuts.
Bob, great to see you as ever. Bob Parker there from Credit Suisse.